Hi, I'm Jazz and I'm an alcoholic and I'm codependent. I work a 12-step program and I seek health. I am a seeker and a traveler in my journey. I did the thing that you're not supposed to do and I got in a relationship in early recovery. So here I'm freshly sober, freshly out of rehab, and I made it about 3 months before I got into quite a serious relationship. And that did make my recovery a lot harder. And I was warned that and told that, and I ignored that. And I continued with this relationship, and this relationship was very hot and cold, very on and off. We had broken up, 3 times before the 4th time of breaking up. And I worked really hard at being a good person in our relationship, voicing the things I needed, voicing, the way I hoped that the family could live and be, and, also vouching for my kids and stuff. And, I worked that relationship to death. And I eventually did have to leave the relationship, but it was super hard. And I only could see that it wasn't good for me until after. And something that's helped me is just as my internal awareness kept going up and I started listening to that more, that voice grew louder inside of me. And that, when I listened to that, that's really what helped me get out and the healthy, safe people that I started to surround myself with. So I broke the rule and I got into a relationship in early recovery, and I thought I knew it all. I thought I was in love. And when I look back now, I think, what the heck was 3-month sober Jazz, thinking? And at that time, I really thought I knew what I was doing. And I was like, I got this. And this is true love and this is great. And I think back then it was probably forming, some kind of trauma bond or dysfunctional attachment. And when I look back at who that person was back then, I didn't know myself. I wasn't healthy. I didn't have boundaries yet. I wasn't living, a purpose-driven life for me. I was living in a reaction mode kind of life. There's so much I hadn't learned yet. And if I could have the chance to talk to myself back then, like this person that I am now, if I could say something to myself back then, I would say, do whatever it takes to stay single for the first year or 2 or more. And I would take this advice for even myself today, being sober and healthy. What I've learned from all of this struggle and these mistakes is that I wouldn't dare get into a relationship now unless I fully really knew myself. And, it just seems like the more I know myself and I listen to myself and I operate from a place of just true honesty for me, that compass, that inner compass that I'm developing, that health that I protect and I nourish, when that's my needle, that just lets in so much more good. It tracks good. And, being really healthy invites healthy. And, instead of wanting healthy, I have to be the thing that I want. And it just seems that as I get healthier, my awareness gets wider and in multiple ways. So I was in this relationship for a long time, and I was very focused on the relationship. I went from booze to you. I went from booze to this guy. And I wasn't a popular girl in school. I always got bullied, and I was kind of a loner. And, I got to a point where I didn't mind being the loner anymore. I got really comfortable in that, being that person. And so here I am in rehab. This guy shows up, and, he was like the popular hot guy, and I never had that before. And I just decided that he was it. And I put him on a pedestal, and I created this fantasy. And I thought, I just thought that was it. And, it felt good to like him. It felt good to think about him. It felt good to think about our future. And I mean, I'm like freshly sober and my eyes are like goo-goo. And, that was such a big mistake at the time, because I didn't know anything, but I thought I knew everything. And it's like, because I was in a pretty abusive relationship before that, only had 6 months prior to treatment, anything felt better than that. And just having a little bit of attention, having this guy be nice to me, having this guy pay attention to me after I'd been ignored for so long, it just felt good. I also didn't have the booze anymore. But being in this guy's view, this guy that I put on a pedestal, being in his view felt great. I was like, I'm being seen now. And I thought, I think there was some times there where we were making connections, and our spiritual growth was near the same level. And what really brought us together was just that we were both in this place trying to get better. We were both in this place working on healing ourselves, and had admitted that, I don't got this. I don't got my life in order. I don't got my drinking's out of control. Like, everything's in shambles. It's complete wreckage, and so me and him were really relating on those topics, those things that were happening, and we made some great connections. And, in those early days, we would read all the daily meditations together. We would go to meetings together, and we would talk about recovery all the time. And over the years, our recoveries changed, and we started doing less of that. And then eventually I made the decision that I needed to start going to my meetings by myself. And so I started going in a different direction with my recovery. And, we started to lose that connection over the years. And, we started to have less to talk about and less to connect on. So now, because, I'm growing up, and he's growing in whatever way he's growing. And, as I continue on my path, and my path I take really seriously. I'm an alcoholic, I'm in rehab, I got to get better, I got little kids, I got a lot on the line. I really respect the fact that I landed there and that I needed help to get out. And, when I did my step 1 in treatment, like, I broke the handle off. Like, I decided that this is the way I have to do it. I have to do this for me and only me, because I couldn't get sober for my kids. I'd look at them and I'd be like, just stop drinking, Jazz. And I just couldn't. And so, like, there was nothing that was going to get me sober except for me deciding to get to a place to get sober. So in rehab, I made that step 1, and I really decided that I'm done with this stuff. And it took days to get to that point. And so I'm taking my recovery very seriously. And I'm in this relationship, which everybody told me not to get into. And I paid the price for that. But I also learned a lot. So we're clashing. Things aren't aligning with us as much anymore. We had a few breakups. We had this, I have always wanted a big family. And, here I choose this guy who doesn't want to have kids and doesn't want a big family. And I'm choosing this person thinking I can change them and fix them. And I spent a lot of time and energy trying to prove to this person that having a family is going to add so much to our life and adds to our life and will, it helps develop me. And, with my first husband, he had said that he wanted a family and a big family. And there were all these things that we had agreed on and we're doing together. And then, after a few years, he just said, I'm done with having kids now. And, that was a bit crushing to me because we were going to have more than a few kids. And so anyways, that relationship got really, really bad. And then, my drinking caught up with me and I ended up in treatment. And now here I'm picking this guy from treatment and now creating this delusional picture, this fantasy. I've just created this whole thing. So it just goes to show me how messed up my thinking is in early recovery. But I so thought my thinking was good. And, I today, I really check my thinking. I check with my sponsor. I need to know what I'm not seeing. I need to know what the unknown is. I need to know what I'm thinking and feeling and really listen to that because I never used to listen to that before. So anyways, our relationship is going for the dumps, for the fourth time. But, on our third breakup, he had come back and had a huge change of heart and said, what, I do want a family. I do want to be with you. You are the person that I want to live the rest of my life with. And, because you want kids, it's not a tall order. I was very upfront with that since the beginning, that I want kids. I've always known that I wanted kids. I've come from a big family. I really value family. I value, good, close people in my life. I value people and connection and, and I just feel like you really do need a good, strong home life and a good family connection. And not that my family of origin it's always been good. Today it's good, but that's one of my biggest values is family. And so he comes back this third time with all the things to say. And so I think, okay, so I hear it in his voice. This is the truth. And so now he moves back to town. He wants to have a family. We move in together again because we'd moved in together and moved back out. But now, it's almost like we're doing some unofficial marriage. And then shortly after that, we're engaged. And then we're pregnant with our first boy, our first child. And we had always had an issue with him and my boys. And he doesn't come from a big family. And that I could have considered that as possibly a red flag. There's many red flags I didn't pay attention to. You know, like why would I pick some guy that doesn't want kids when I want to have a big family? And one of my character defects is fantasizing and wishful thinking. And I was taking something that wasn't showing me what it was, and I was creating the picture that I wanted to see. And, today I have to really look at what it is and what I'm actually seeing instead of what I want to see. I really try to live in my reality today. And now I believe that will be the thing that shows me what those green lights are and show me what those red flags are. So we are in this relationship and we move, and I'm pregnant, and things were, it had the big confession that he wants to come back and start a family. And so I took that as the solution. And part of it was the solution. Like I had this feeling that I was running out of time because I'm, in my 30s, and there's only so much time to have a career and kids and do everything before you're 40 as a woman, and where it starts to get a lot trickier, time starts getting a lot shorter. And so I've always had that on my mind in my life. And so we're pregnant, and the issue with my kids is there just wasn't that, like, I felt like I always had to protect them and I couldn't relax. And I was exhausted because I was always hammering out I would see something and I was trying to say, hey, like, this is this way. I don't like the way this is. And, they could never see their own behavior. And it just seemed like I was always pointing out their behavior. And, we'd go to courses and classes about caregiving, and my one son is autistic. So we're involved in all of these extra sessions, and our household is very emotion-based awareness. And I'm doing these things, and he's saying he's doing these things, but it's not really rolling out that way in the home. In the mornings when there's together time, there isn't this real genuine love coming out. Like, the words of love are coming out, but things are just not lining up. The math isn't right. And I wanted to believe, like, I did believe the words for a long time. And, I believed the words for a long time. But anyways, I was just thinking, like, I wanted to leave when I was pregnant, and everybody said, don't leave when you're pregnant. Like, that's crazy. Like, you can't just move when you're pregnant. You move out. And what are you thinking? Like, everybody had something to say about my life and my decision. And, someone's always going to have something to say about my life and my decision. And it's up to me to listen to that or not. And, I've gotten really good at just listening to my own inner voice and compass. And I do reach out and confirm that I'm not too off the mark. But I didn't really listen to that inner compass as much. I didn't follow that. I was living in a bit of a reactionary mode of what people are going to think, and trying to take too many people's perspectives on what I should do. And so everybody said, okay, when you have the baby, he's all of a sudden going to become a father to your boys, and this is going to be great. And, there was this idea that when he had his own child in the world, that things were just going to level out. And things were going to settle, and he was just going to become this person that I wanted him to be. And so I am focused on the potential. I'm in love with the potential. I'm in love with something that isn't there. And, I'm in love with this false reality that I've created. And I'm just in like angst and hope that it's going to portray that way. Like I am making a bad bet. And the fear of just like losing the bet is high. And because also it's not a good bet. Like there's a lot of reasons. The reality is showing that this might not be the case. So it's like I already know that I'm making a bad bet inside. And anyways, so I decided, okay, fine. I'm going to take people's advice and I'm going to wait. And I'm going to have this baby with him in our house and with my boys. And all of a sudden he is going to become this great dad to my boys. He is going to get it. He's going to have some real skin in the game. And so, what happened was our son was born and that was really great. I think was eventually meant to have kids in this life. And maybe that's what our contract was in the universe. But, he did become a really great father to our son. And to this day, he is a great father to him and loves him. And, what happened was, we both have work to do. We both have healing work to do. And so here he is. Our son is now put on a pedestal and is just the greatest thing in our house. And that is true, right? Like it's our baby. He's our little baby. And I love him so much. But what happened is it just was another thing to push my boys to the wayside. And, he kept saying like, look, it's all fine. Like we're all together. Like don't wreck a good thing. And I do love them, but like it just, something wasn't showing or real or coming out, with those words. It wasn't really, didn't feel real to me. And, it's like every time me and him were alone with our baby, he would paint the picture frame and be like, oh, look at us. And isn't this so great? And he'd pull me in and pull him in and always in front of a mirror and would just be like, look at us. And I always felt a bit like I was portraying my other kids. And because he wouldn't show that kind of love and affection and honesty with my boys, or when me and my boys were always together, he only showed that genuine love when it was me and our baby. It was me and him by ourselves. Whenever my boys went away for the weekend, he turned up. He was in his glory, and he was happier, and he was, he gave me all of the things that I had been craving for all week. And so it's like I was like living in this mode of like waiting for those times to get that version of him that I wanted all the time. And it was more than breadcrumbs. I guess it just kind of kept me hopeful. And I think I hoped that version of him would just sort of spread back into the week when my boys were home, or when they got home, he would stay that way. And so every time, like right before my boys would get home, I'd be excited for this version that he was giving me. And then I would lose that guy, and my boys would come home and he would change, and he'd become distant, and he'd become irritated. And then it felt like I lost a friend. And then I would be very frustrated and confused why that person left. I'd feel abandoned. I felt the loss. And, it felt like it was like my fault that my kids were back. My kids were home. And I love my kids. And it hurts me, and that's my choice to get hurt, but I'm hurt, almost every time my kids come home. And then, I was living in a place where I felt like I had to always put my kids away and hurry up and like get my kids dealt with, and so that I could get to him and, then fill his emotional bucket. And so like, when our son was born, it felt like I had 3 children, and it felt like he had 1 child. And so he became very hyper-focused on everything that our child needed and wanted and would talk about. And he was very excited about everything that had to do with our kid. But then there was just this very, it was a very different experience, what was happening with me, with my boys and him. And it just wasn't the same. And it wasn't even close to the same. And it just felt so forced and fake. And living in a house in close quarters, my boys, our baby, and him, and having to feel so divided all the time. And I always felt like I had to choose. And then I always felt like I had to ignore what I was seeing. And I had to work a really hard program in that situation. And I got to a point where I didn't want to work this hard at just trying to have a good life and be happy. It was really hard. And, lots of resentments were being born. And, so in our relationship, some things were good, but things were really not okay with me. And, I thought, okay, well, we have our baby. I waited to see if the baby was born, and I waited to see that and to see how he would be as a father. And so what I started to see was that, yes, he did become a great father, and he probably was meant to do this and be this, but he didn't change how he was with my boys. And there's some kind of block there. And it's on my job to change that or fix that, I've learned. And, I think that's just, I want more for my boys than that. And I don't want to, I just think they deserve more than that. Like they're innocent little children. And, I just felt like their self-esteem was suffering. There was favoritism, and it just felt like my boys were always second. They're always waiting. They always weren't enough. And I don't think it's fair to them they don't have to prove anything. They don't need to be worthy of love. They are worthy of love. And I really believe that has to be something in the home. Like, if they feel like they're worthy of love in the home, and they don't have to work for it, and it's not conditional, then they're going to develop some sense of worthiness, that I am lovable no matter what, however I am, wherever I am. And that's the value I'm trying to give my boys. And so I'm seeing this difference, and I just can't see it anymore. I've hit a tolerance level, and I've got these applications in town for like affordable housing and subsidized housing. So I'm doing my homework, and I'm looking into this stuff. And I talked about breaking up before, and I was met with a lot of reasons why I shouldn't. And sure enough, I get pregnant again, which I'm okay with, but I also realize our relationship really hasn't got that much better. We've just have more things. We have our baby. We did have a better house, but with those core issues were still the same, and those negative core issues were still festering. It just felt like the more we worked at it, it didn't really didn't really change things to the core, to the root of it. And so here I'm pregnant again. And I just, I said this, I was like, I needed help to get out of there. And I was like, Lord, you gotta open the place up and I'll go there. You open it up, I'll go there. And I just sort of said that like under my breath one day, because I tried everything and I couldn't get myself out. And so I said this prayer and I was like, well, I'm just going to call that one place one more time and just see if they have a place. And I wasn't looking to move. I just thought I was just like, I'm going to just cross this off my list. And I should just call because it's been a few months. And I called this place and she goes, oh, I'm so glad you called because I didn't have your number, but we do have a place. But I need to know what you want to do ASAP. And so I said, I was stunned and I just said, okay, give me a day. And so I went back and I prayed about it some more. And, what I also did is I looked in my phone at my phone history, and I don't know if I was looking to get some more answers to convince myself that I should do this, but something led me to just look at my phone history, and I had called them already 6 times in the last year. And I thought, oh, like I've been serious about this thought for a long time. And these are all micro steps that I've already taken towards this desire. And, my desire was for healthier, was for safer, was, I want to live my life, not survive my life. And I just felt like I was doing so much work to keep my head out of water. And I didn't want that to be the rest of my life. And I can't make this person treat my kids any better. They don't want to treat my kids any better. This was the way my life was right now, was that he has a son and loves his son, our son, and then I have my boys to take care of. So I was, really looking at my reality. It just seemed like I was getting more kids. And so I'm going to be taking care of 4 children while he takes care of 1 or 2 children. And then I'm also having to parent him to parent my children. So there was a lot of extra effort that I had to put in, to protect my children, but then be the person that he wants me to be for our kids. Because then if I wasn't joining in his picture frame with me and our kids, then now I'm leaving him. So it's just this like awful dynamic that's happening. And I couldn't live in that picture anymore. And so I did choose to take this place. And you know what? Everybody said, don't move because you're pregnant. And now here I am, I'm pregnant again. And I was like, I'm not waiting this time to see what happens. I've got a good idea what's going on now, and maybe I got a good idea of his capacity. And, the only person I'm lying to is me. And I still didn't believe at the time that I should move and leave and that was what was best for me. But so I had to, move myself out of my situation. And I said, I'm just going to move and I'll see what it all looks like from that side of the fence. I had to do something different. I had to make a change. I was making some changes, but I wasn't wearing our engagement ring anymore. We weren't sleeping in the same room. Things were, there's the fighting, just the exhaustion of the parenting issues. And, I just didn't feel like we were united, and we just didn't have that partnership. And And so this time I was like, I had to go against what everybody said for me to do. And I had to make that decision all by myself, for myself, on my own. And that was the scariest thing I've ever had to pretty much do in my life. I never really made a full soul decision just for me and only me. And he goes, okay, well, if you're really going to move, I'm not helping you. So I'm like, 7-8 months pregnant. I mean, it is pretty ridiculous to move that pregnant. But I was just thinking like, okay, I'm not going to be able to move with a newborn. And how am I going to move with 4 children? And I was just thinking, what's the inventory for moving now? If I move now, I'm going to be really exhausted and tired. The baby could come early. If I move now, it felt easier to move super pregnant than to move with a newborn. And I thought, what am I scared of? I'm scared of what people are going to think. I'm scared of how this looks. I'm scared of being the bad guy because I'm wrecking the family. I was scared that what this would do to my kids, and we'd moved so much. Like, I've moved so much in early recovery. I'm still in early recovery. And I felt a lot of shame for moving. And, but one thing that I've done through this whole thing is I've always put recovery first. I've worked really good. I've worked really hard at my recovery, going to meetings, talking to my sponsor, getting a home group, like all the things, having a higher power, like doing the steps. I do all the things, and my recovery has been the most consistent thing in my life. And I thought, my one girlfriend said, kids are resilient. Like kids are going to get through this. My doctor said, life is hard, and our kids are going to go through hard things. And if you're there to support your kids to go through hard things like that, and you're doing your job. I'm not supposed to make it comfortable for them all the time, but I am there for them through the uncomfortable. And so I had a bit of, awareness that, it didn't look good and it was going to be hard. And I was worried about what my kids how they were going to feel and think. And it broke my heart a little because, they couldn't really see what was happening in the home, but I could see. And I just had this idea that eventually they're going to see. And I think that they were feeling something but couldn't understand it. And I could tell that they were trying to change themselves to fit his approval and his mold. And I didn't want to raise my kids in that way of, you should change and fit so that someone likes you. Like, I want them to feel like that, like they should like themselves, and who comes and goes, that's just the way that goes. Like, they shouldn't have to change for other people. And, I just didn't like the path that my children were being influenced. Like, they were being influenced by this person, and I just couldn't tolerate that anymore. But anyways, a place opened up, and I always said these prayers for places that I wanted to move into to my higher power. And then this time my prayer list got really short, and I said, I just needed something that was available. So I ended up moving, I had to give up all the things that I wanted. So I never wanted to be in a townhome. I didn't want to live in this certain part of town. And here I am, the Lord opens up, it's only available. I go to this place. It's in a rough part of town. There's cigarette burns on the carpet, on the bathtub. It stinks like smoke, cigarettes. It's like a really run down, low income place. And I don't like townhomes because they're boxy. Like, I really like these open spaces and rancher style places, and a yard. Had no yard. And I just had to say that I just need to get there, and I'm not going to be there forever. And if I get there, then I'm out of this situation. So it's a stepping stone. It's not the rest of my life. And I can always move back. So I gave myself, like, I want to do this decision, but I gave myself these outs. And, I'm grateful that I've moved here, and I've made my little house really nice, and my kids they are fine. And the thing is that I'm the most consistent thing in my kids' life, and I keep my recovery strong. I keep me strong, and whatever is changing around in our life can change. But my boys always have me, and they trust me, and they rely on me, and they get a happy, healthy mom that's growing. And I thought that was more important than staying in my situation. That when I was in that situation, I did not like myself, and I didn't like the person that I was modeling for my kids. The whole situation, I didn't like what I was modeling for my children, and kids copy, and I didn't want my kids copying me in that state. And so I moved into this place, and and I thought maybe I would change my mind and go back, and I would not, because since I've left that relationship, not that it's just the relationship's fault, it's just that for my recovery, for me, I needed to do this for me, and I need to do it for my boys. And now I'm actually able to work on my recovery without this big distraction. It took away. And today I live in a place of it either has to be in par with where I'm at or add to my life, where instead of trying to bring things up to a certain place, it needs to add to my life. And it was a huge drain, a huge effort. And now that have more freedom to focus on me, all those efforts I was putting into that sinking thing are all going into me. Like, all that effort I was putting into that, all that effort now goes into our life and into me, and everything is better, and my clarity is better. I am stronger. I am healthier, and now I can really see how unhealthy that situation was. But when I was in that situation, I couldn't see. And I had to do it without knowing the answers and without seeing. And I had to push through all of those fears. And you know what? It's like a blip in time. It's all gone by. My kids are fine. If anything, everybody is happier and healthier. So yeah, I moved super pregnant. I blew the whole family up, but I saved myself. I saved my health. I protected my recovery. I did the hard thing, and I pushed through that fear. And and I'm more stronger now, and I don't care what people think. Like, that gave me so much more strength from doing that hard thing. And that's just life for me, is figuring out how to get through hard things, get to the other side. And the more I do that, the more I find out that I'm actually okay. It's fear that gets in the way of a lot of these things. And my kids deserve a happy, healthy mom, and they get to have that today. because I don't have to put them away, my relationship with my boys has also just increased and become more beautiful than it was. And I am glad that I have that opportunity to let that grow into what it is meant and supposed to be. You know, I love my boys, and it's possible. I guess my message is that, you know, I've done the hard thing, and I'm okay. And it's my head that keeps me stuck. So I've had a lot of support through this journey, and there was a lot of unknowns, but I had a lot of support, and I fought for it. Thank you so much. Bye.